Motivation is bullshit.
It's not though. You want to debate? We can debate this.
Let's debate it. Well, it's always fun to have a good debate with you. The 13% of the time that we absolutely disagree on something. Although on the other side of this, I somehow feel like we're going to be significantly closer. But I was chatting with somebody yesterday, and or actually not yesterday, 2 days ago, and we were talking about the idea of motivation, and I literally said, I was like, cool, I get it, and yeah, you need motivation to like start, like literally step one. That there's this in my mind, motivation is representative of I have no history of success in this thing. I haven't started the thing. It's not a lifestyle part of my life. Like, it's not just part of my routine. I have no consistency around it. So I need the motivation to take the jumping off point and take the first step. But if we're talking 6 months in, a year in, and all of the thing that we're talking about now at this point in time is theoretically baked into your routine, at that point in time, motivation is absolutely bullshit. And it's one of those things where you need to move from motivation to just consistency and lifestyle. So I know you don't wholeheartedly see it the same way. So how do you think about it, Andrew?
Well, according to the literature,
fuck,
because
fuck data. Fuck
this,
data.
this is my realm of research, so I'm gonna respectfully disagree. But I think that, I think that we are kind of speaking from the idea, from a similar idea, and I think that what we hear a lot of times is that there is this age old, and this is very prevalent in social media, motivation. Some people say discipline matters more. Some people say motivation matters more. And I think that, like everything else, this is why you can find research that says milk is bad for you, milk is good for you. You should have more, vegan protein is not going to cause you to go impotent, which we know it does, right? If you are a vegan, you will not have children. I'm just kidding, listeners. I love you. Um, but, but we find that there's the devil's in the nuances, right? The devil's in the details. And I think what a lot of people are alluding to is the idea of intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation. The carrot and the stick versus the internal drive is another way of looking at that. And when we hear people kind of use this idea that motivation is bullshit, I think what they're largely alluding to, and this could be completely different, um, is that you need some kind of super energizing, incentivizing reason for you to get up and have to go do something. Like there has to be very compelling reason instead of having some kind of innate, like just drive that you want to do it because it's the thing that you either committed to or you are not disciplined if you don't do that. And it really adds this layer of morality of good or bad in there. And that's where I think when we think about if we just define motivation for a second, and I'm going to use the research definition because I think it helps a little bit, and then I'd love for you to hear your definition of how you kind of see it and what it is and what it means to you. But motivation, according to research, very simplistically, is the impetus to act. Right? There is a reason to act, and you won't take an action unless there's a reason, and that's whether if you want to stay in bed, why do you want to stay in bed? Is it because you don't feel like you're ready to tackle the day? Is it because you're tired? There's a reason always to do something, and this is where I think it's really important during conflict to understand that no one's crazy. And this is really hard in relationships when we're like, God, my spouse or my significant other is crazy, and
No, no, no. There are some crazy. I'm just some people are crazy, Andrew.
well, in the mental health world, we stay away from that stigma, but it makes sense to them. They're not crazy to them, right? It makes sense to them. So that's where I'm saying our perspective is it doesn't align with what we think someone should do. And if it's really far away from that, we're like, oh my gosh, I can't comprehend that. You're crazy. That's the label that we ascribe to people. Versus like, well, and this is where I think you do a really good job of this, of taking the time to ask the questions, to understand the situation, and then ultimately it's funny because people don't want to act if the obstacle or if they don't feel understood is still present. And sometimes just by asking the questions, people are like, I feel better. Let me go ahead and take that action. Right. So that's kind of what I would define motivation as from my research in there. How would you define it when you say motivation is bullshit, and what does that mean to you?
So motivation to me is I guess similar to what you said, energy required to take the first step. Okay. So, for context to our listeners, you have a client, and the first step is the first few times they track their macros, their calories, the first few times they go to the gym if they haven't been, or the first few times they start doing a new workout regimen if they have been doing something old. At a certain point in time, I believe that motivation has to move out of motivation to start the process into consistency of now the process is the process. And I'm talking also like scaling. Hey, across the course of the next year,
Mm.
you need motivation in month one to get all the things started, or when you're adding a new thing to the repertoire of your toolbox. But in month 11, if you still have to be motivated every single time to go get out of bed, to go work out or work out whenever or whatnot, that to me is a recipe for at some point in time, this thing is not a habit. It's not part of your life. It's not just baked into what you do. And it's going to stop, fail, decline, slow down, whatever the appropriate words might be.
Yeah. So I'm hearing that to you, it's more like the excitement and the energy around doing something instead of the reason necessarily to act.
Yeah, out of the gates, right?
Okay.
Out
Yeah,
of the gates.
for sure. Yeah, and so that's where, like, and this is why I think it's really important for people to understand the compelling reason why someone wants to achieve something. Because now if we start to dig through that a little bit, and it's really, and this is where I think here's one of the worst things personal trainers do up front, or any fitness professional during a consultation, is that they dig the why and they try to understand and they ask all these really invasive questions without taking the time to build the relationship. And so they're like, well, why is that? And we hear this thing of like, ask the five whys, and it gets really, really uncomfortable. And oftentimes, like, this is what will cause fitness professionals or nutrition professionals or anyone that has a health delivery service in general to lose that relationship, because now this person starts feeling uncomfortable. They put up walls and they guard and they deflect. And so when we look at motivation, like, that's something that you have to suss out over time. And that does take a little bit of finesse when we start getting into the tactical implementations of like, well, okay, motivation, like, it's the reason to act. And some people need an energy and excitement to cause them to want to act, right? The other possibility is that if you're potentially going to be, if you're going to go bankrupt and you're going to lose your house and you're going to lose everything that you have, you're going to have some extra energy to act. But what happens now when you get comfortable enough that you're no longer at risk? And this is where people get complacent in life and they kind of settle into that middle area where, and it's kind of the idea of the golden handcuffs principle when it comes to careers. I'm making enough money to satisfy my lifestyle. I'm not quite where I'd love to be. I don't quite have all the freedoms, but I'm also not really uncomfortable. So let me go to sleep, go to work, go party on the weekend, wake up on Monday, do it again. And that's really the biggest trap. And that's where I think we really start to converge and have the same idea here is, however we define it, the idea is, how do we continue to sustain something that's a compelling reason for people to take action? And I think that that might be a good segue here to, in your opinion, in your perspective, it sounds like you have a very strong vision of what it takes for someone to continuously do that stuff, to stay in action. What do you normally recommend that people do to stay motivated, or to continue to have a reason to act, or to get the thing done?
It comes down to an ultimate, I would say, intrinsic belief that what you're doing, your actions, your thought process, your whatever topic at hand, is going to lead you to the ultimate outcome, or closer to the outcome that you're working towards, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
you mentioned money and whatever, and I have to be super diligent and go work harder, or I'm going to lose a house or an apartment or a car, or something like that, and you're going to be more motivated to go try to figure out money. Okay, great. Well, in a period of time, usually speaking, super desperate people find a way to make more money
Can you give an example?
comparatively to what they've made prior to that, right? And you alluded to that. When we think about that, what if you maintain some of those actions post being quote unquote comfortable, and continued to make the same amount of money, to now widen the gap from where you are to a point in time where you ever potentially have to go back to that feeling again? Sometimes it's, eating in more. never ordering out. Sometimes it's getting a cheaper car. Sometimes it's
Mm-hmm.
going to be giving up things that you want. Like if you have a closet full of 100 shoes, maybe it's selling some of the shoes and getting rid of that habit. But saying you don't have money, but then clearly going and looking at somewhere and be like, well, it looks like you have money.
Mm-hmm.
And now you're like, oh, well, I really like that thing. It's like, well, that's cool. That thing doesn't help you get the thing you actually need or want,
Mm-hmm.
and maintaining that thought process. So it just comes down to the things you're doing need to be something or should be something that you can sustain, that can fit in your life, that you can maintain doing beyond. Like for me, I'm up every morning 5:20, 5:30 to go to the gym.
Mm-hmm.
Not because I have to, but because it's a part of my life. I literally wake up without an alarm to get up and go work out. And I enjoy my morning routine of working out. And I mean, right now the workouts are kind of tough, so I enjoy them, but you know what I mean. By the end of it, I'm like, oh, Andrew's trying to kill me. But it just comes down to
They're
what
long.
you're doing now to move away from a severe pain. How do you convert that into something you can maintain? And that becomes really the big key between success in what you're working on
Mm-hmm.
and falling back to where you don't want to be potentially.
Yeah, I think, it's funny when we think about the things that people acquire that they don't need. And this is where I think social media is it's becoming a worse and worse place for me to witness these things. And TikTok in particular, where it seems like every other thing is an ad to buy something.
Oh my God.
I
It's a
get so
lot of them.
irritated. Yeah, and there's not a way to filter out, like if you have Netflix, you can pay initial $8 to get the ads filtered out, and like most people would probably argue that their time comes at a premium, and if you're having to spend 90 seconds every 8 minutes to finish a show, then is that worth $8 across a given month? And I would argue yes. But that's my little soapbox on that. So TikTok, clean your shit up. You're getting banned for a reason. Do better. But when you think about the premise is fear of missing out versus aspiring for something greater. And I think it's really important that when you consider what actions you're willing to take and what you're looking to do, and you really weigh it out. Otherwise, you're going to waste a lot of psychological energy being like a dog that's caged in a fence, trying to chase cars that are passing by without ever really having the opportunity to actually achieve that or get to the car, so to speak. FOMO is, the fear of missing out. And when you think about like having a new iPhone or getting a new car because you saw someone else has one, or there's an ad that got served up to you, and it really is, there's a lot of psychology that goes into marketing of making people feel like they're lacking something or making something feel more appealing in the way that it's going to greatly improve your life, which is a lack of, right? Because if your life isn't where you want it to be, this could be the thing that gets you there. And this is where I think a lot of businesses will even take on unsavory practices of digging people's pain and selling them a $12,000 educational bundle that actually doesn't deliver the outcome. And in fact, we know that the majority of people, and when I say I'm talking about the overwhelming majority of people, 90+% won't finish it, right? They won't even finish the first course. And now they have this big loan. And so that was not necessarily the thing that that person needed, which the company took advantage of. It was definitely something that on the back end served the company's needs but didn't meet the consumer's needs in that immediate moment. And oftentimes these people are taking out loans and shit for this. And so when I think about that, um, the fear of missing out can be a very powerful motivator because people try to fill, this is one of the big aspects of motivation, people try to fill the void that they think and they feel is missing, which might not actually be the truth. If you're hungry, you go eat. There's a biological drive for that. And that's what we call your dopamine reward system. It's literally biology where I have a deficit, I do this thing, it feels good, let me continue to do it. And this is where crippling consumerism of buying more things gives you that dopamine response. You get something new. And this is actually a problem in dating even these days where people want something new and they don't know how to have that conversation with their partner. And now it evolves into, not having their needs met because they want this thing and they're not knowing how to communicate that. Now they go cheat, right? So it's everywhere when we talk about motivation, reward systems, biology. Maslow's hierarchy is another motivational kind of model for people to look at. If you don't have shelter, if if you don't have food, if you don't have water, if you don't have these things, you don't care about being your best self. Let's be honest. Like if you can't pay your bills, you're not necessarily looking at, most people, some people will, how to give back to your community. And so this is why when we talk about having compelling reasons to act, what people do is usually a great indication of what they're missing or what they feel or what they see they're lacking. And so if you see people that aren't tracking their food, that's not because they're not tracking their food. It could be because they're doing something else in place of that. So we want to look at people's behaviors to reverse engineer what they value and what their perspective of the world is. And that's where now we're like, okay, cool. Well, you want to spend your time playing video games. Like, why? What do those video games give you? Because now you're telling me that you don't have time to track your food, which takes all of literally 90 seconds to take the food out, put it on a scale, and put it in your phone app. Help me understand why a 25-minute game of Call of Duty is more important to you. And it becomes this thing where even parents that say, hey, I really value my kids and they're my biggest priority. I'm like, okay, cool, here's a time tracking sheet. Let's look at how you're spending your time. And they spend 5 hours a day at the gym on top of their full-time job. And you're like, I mean, how you spend your time when you can't attend your kid's, sporting event, whatever, would be indicative that you care more about your own physicality than you do care about your spending time with your kids. So how you spend your time is a large indication of, again, what you're intrinsically driven to, but people will always try to fill the void of what they think is missing.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, wrapping this up, sounds like you completely agree with the idea that motivation is bullshit, except for 99% of all the other reasons that maybe it is useful and everything there. But I would say, from an actionable perspective, so let's think tactics here.
Yeah.
What is one thing that coaches can use to help get a client to take the actions that they know they need and the client has potentially already kind of agreed to, that like, yeah, this thing's going to help me? Like what is that one thing that coaches can do?
The thing that jumps in my head is like curiosity is the construct that you then ask leading questions to leverage. So the tool is leading questions. And if we know we're trying to get someone to see the value in something, if we tell them about the value of something that's more directive, people will usually resist that. But if we help people stumble and discover the answer without jumping in to do something called the righting reflex, RIGHTING, that means we're trying to fix everything. But if we allow people the time to explore and like figure that out, in this case, it'd be like, well, Steve, why do you think motivation is bullshit? Where does that come from? And we ask these series of questions to try to lead someone to a similar conclusion that we have, or if we want to see where it goes inherently, then we can kind of just see where it goes. But you'll get a lot out of things if you practice curiosity by asking more questions instead of directing and using more statements. So that's my biggest thing around motivation, understanding where people are, because you don't want to fight that. It's a losing proposition, and you're both going to be frustrated.
All right, there you have it.
What about yours?
Ask those questions and get curious. I gave mine. Just kick them in the ass until they get doing what they need to do. Show up next to their bed, rip them out of bed, get them to the gym, stand behind them, and just chase them down while they're running on that treadmill, burning those calories.
You can charge more for that, by the way.
You can.
Rip people out of bed, that's at least a $30 premium on top of.
Easy. A 30% premium.
30% premium. Oh, fuck yeah. I love it. Unless you have a $50 session, in which case it's a $30 premium.
Yeah, then it's a 60% premium.
Yeah.
So
yeah, for sure.
All right, gang. Well, thanks for listening on in. Hit that subscribe button so that way you can go ahead and get notified of our other episodes. Throw some comments in there if you want us to chat about something else. Feel free to ask so we know what to talk about. Until next time.